Hey yo, what it did, y'all? Let's get right into it. There's been a lot of teasers going around, like a lot of them, with direct teasers, covert teasers, funny little dead totem teasers. There's a lot going on, and so it's finally time to talk a little bit. But I specifically want to talk about the defensive rebalance that seems to be on its way in, just kind of ahead of time as a primer, because I sense that these patch notes might be tumultuous, especially with the announcement that the stream on Thursday will be 325 only, even. It's the first time that's happened in a while, which leads me to believe that there might be a lot of information that they're trying to divulge at once, as well as potentially a really big swing in these patch notes upcoming that we should definitely be preparing ourselves for. And so we all know that this started with the D-term nerf that people saw in the auras and heralds remaining after death teaser that they showed us, and everybody's like, whoa, what's that nerf to D term they've got there? And then everybody started panicking and spiraling, and luckily, a couple days later we got a teaser that started to assuage some of those concerns. But I want to go ahead and create this video just to consolidate all of my thoughts on this topic in particular into one spot. Again, talking about the defensive rebounds that I think is coming. Again, think because me, just like you, I don't have access to the patch notes ahead of time. I could be wildly wrong about what I'm about to assert in this video or predict that, but that's the fun of this stuff, right? It's fun to talk about the game in this predictive manner as we all wait in anticipation for Thursday. So before I get into that, all the fun stuff, right? Remember, if you like these type of videos, liking the video lets me know, and also subscribing to the channel so you can see more of what I post, including, turning the notification bell on so you know when I do post. Now, let's get into it, right? The main thing here is to talk about the nerf to determine first. It is the starting point of all of this. The nerf to determine, if you are unaware, which that'd be crazy if you're unaware at this point, but I could understand, is that the flat armor on it seems to have been reduced by about half. There's still no full confirmation that there was no aura effect in the clip that we got this from or not. It is entirely possible that there actually might be aura effect in play. This could be even worse. But on the assumption that there's no aura effect in play, it's a HAL effect version of the termination at level 22 that was shown in the footage, but only on the flat armor. The percent armor never changed in the footage, but it was the flat armor that got reduced, and that sent everybody into a panic. And I mean, rightfully so. Rightfully so. It panicked me the first time I recognized it as well. But you know, we take a moment, we step back, we thought about it, and I said on stream that weekend that it was most likely a rebalance in the idea that auras are doing too much for your character relative to what your actual gear meant in terms of defenses. That was my guess at it on stream while playing. I believe I was playing Burst Ascendant when I was talking about this. And little did I know, about 2 days later, they then showed the quality change that they were doing. And in that quality change video, they showed a new ES base, the Dreamweaver Silks, I think is what it was called. But it has 30% more base ES than Evolve Regalia did. As well as we have now quality being multiplicative instead of additive, right? Instead of being a increased defense stat, it is now a more defense on this piece stat. And so therefore, between the two changes, body armors, like just from the body armors that we know so far, because it's reasonable to assume, we'll get into this a little bit later, that they're going to be more than just the ES base being added, that just in terms of Vol Regalia to Dreamweaver Silk, there's a non-zero chance that we're going up something in the ballpark of 50 to 70% ES just from that one slot. And so now, if we are to work on the idea that this does get extrapolated to armor evasion bases, even if we only have this in the chest piece slot, right? Even if this is only in the chest slot, we are now going to get an upgraded Sadist Garb and an upgraded Glorious Plate and all that stuff, right? Even if we only assume those bases in particular are getting updated, no other slots, getting a 50% increase in the armor evasion, yes, etc., that we get from just our chest pieces, in a lot of these cases, is going to neutralize or even outperform the nerf to determination. Now, this is before aura effect, and it's actually the main reason that I think that we might be looking at getting a little bit more in terms of other base updates, because I do think the goal is not to nerf us defensively. I think a lot of the panic that everybody went through, me included, like I'm not gonna pretend that it didn't freak me out just a little bit when I first read it. I think a lot of the panic we all went through at first was the worry that they were trying to nerf us defensively, and we don't like the sound of that because we all know that the game is currently defensively walking the worst knife's edge. And honestly, it's probably failing that walk at this very moment. But it's playable enough that we're willing to cope through it. But T17s have really opened a lid on a lot of defensive problems that still exist in this game. And so nerfing defenses at a time where T17s are crushing us feels like the wrong thing to be doing. But what I do think they're looking at is moving more of your defense away from these reservations, or at least the specific reservations, grace, determination, and I do expect that discipline will be included in this patch as well. I do not think ES builds are just going to get a free pass on this. CI is not actually nearly as weak as people think it is. It's just that, you know, auras are expensive and you have to run a source of Fizmit somehow right now anyways. And that's kind of where the problem all really lies. Now, I'm going to give you my wider thought on why I actually like this idea, which is I think much like Expedition, I apologize if I just triggered anybody with those words, but much like Expedition, I think they're trying to open up design space. Expedition's changes served to open up space for them to try to solve problems in a new way without having to do it in such an egregious and overtuned way that it had to forcibly power creep out the existing solution. So in the Expedition example, I'm talking about ailment resolution, for example, like dealing with ailments going into Expedition was either you played a Ascendancy that was just outright immune to elemental ailments, such as like Inquiz with Pious Path, or a Raider with Avatar of the Veil Taken, for example, like things that literally just gave you ailment immunity, or a large amount of ailment avoidance to be paired with something very easy to get your hands on after the fact. And instead, they were able to take power out of those things, as well as out of the flask, to redistribute that power elsewhere into the game. And it took them some time to get there, and that's the one thing that I hope they don't do this time, because they nerfed all that down, and then we got the Pantheon update, Arctic Armor, Tempest Shield, Period of Elements buff, alongside the introduction of Ancestral Vision, Storm Shroud, and some other stuff regarding ailment control over the course of like 2 or 3 patches. And I really hope that if they're looking to open up defensive space, specifically this time I'm talking about physical mitigation, I really hope that if they're looking to open up space for design in the Fizmit world, that it comes this patch. Like, that we get this change, and then immediately after we start to see some of the benefits of this change. And the other half of this could be that they're trying to force us to look at the options that do already exist, because I have already been experimenting with other methods of fizz mitigation in the game before I even knew that this was going to happen, because, well, you know, all good things must come to an end at some point. I knew that Determination's days were numbered about a year ago. At some point, it was going to get touched because it is an overperformer, and I started looking at other ways to mitigate fizz damage, and there are some decent methods that I think will become really strong if the value of our bases actually go up. There's also a world where the value of bases going up and down will change tree pathing or character building procedures that in a way that might not actually require extensive amounts of buffing in other directions afterwards. Generally speaking, I'm excited for this type of change because it is just a fundamental shakeup to how we make our characters. The idea that the term and grace at the moment, one or the other, is almost basically an auto include in every build, and you are usually trying to compensate for not having the other once you've chosen which one you will have, or in a lot of cases you are running both. I think being able to have a recourse from that world is actually going to be very nice, as well as just generally speaking for players like me who actually don't run these auras as much as you would think. I'm looking forward to the increased defenses on that end. There's a couple other defensive updates that are worth talking about as well that we have seen already. Mainly, there's a new life mod tier, right? We saw a pair of boots that had 121 life, I believe it was, on them, and or maybe it was 126. It was some number that was not mathematically achievable currently. Like, even if you were to use a deafening essence of greed on the pair of boots and then proceed to either hit T1 hybrid with life or to unveil hybrid with life, neither situation was able to actually reach that amount of life, which means there's definitely a new tier in play, and potentially even 2 tiers, Or what could be is just an update to the ranges on the tiers, because it is notably higher. And most people's intuition decided that the hybrid mod that we saw on that item is actually most likely just the hybrid evasion and stun and block recovery mod, which means that that 120 something life that we saw had no hybrid mod involved whatsoever and was just the life mod, which is actually really exciting. We're talking about really good potential for defensive upgrades here, right? Increasing pool is another very meaningful way to increase our survivability. It's the same. It's the reason that, Captain Lance loves his life and ES stacking characters so much, is because you get away with not having to layer so many percent mitigations together when you actually just have a large amount of life. That's a topic for a different video, though, right? That's just another angle for survivability. What do all of these changes mean then? What these changes most likely mean is that we are definitely headed into a space that is going to be new to us. It's going to kind of remind me of Scourge League potentially. I'm hoping not as rough as Scourge League. Fingers crossed, y'all. It's not as rough as Scourge League. Scourge League was rough. Getting accustomed to the new physical damage output that we were taking, physical damage intake that we were taking from mobs. That was a shock. And so I hope that it's not as shocking, my bad, of a curve in terms of getting used to it, but I do expect that we're going to need to get used to some new defensive mechanisms in order to actually survive in our maps. I want to, before I wind this down, by the way, I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions of things to look at that I've been looking at, again, especially with the knowledge that, our reservation package might actually be changing this patch for the first time in a little while. Number one, I would look into Enfeeble. If you are not aware, Enfeeble is a really, really strong defensive curse. It is what people seem to sometimes think Temp Chains is. Like, you hear Temp Chains is a defensive curse and you think it's defensive in the way that it mitigates damage. No, Temp Chains is defensive in the way that it makes it harder for them to hit you. It just acts slower. Enfeeble is a defensive curse in the way that it actually mitigates damage. It both reduces accuracy rating as well as crit strike chance, as well as direct damage reduction. And not even just direct damage, it reduces all damage outgoing from a target that is infected by Enfeeble. Very strong source of it. You can put it on an aura with Blasphemy, and you might think that's not very, very valuable. It's actually a pretty good amount of DR for 35% of your mana, especially if you are a character that can scale Curse Effect to any degree, right? Maybe you're a multi-cursing character who has incentives to scale Curse Effect. Now you get some defensive value out of that as well. You could also get Enfeeble placed through like Curse on Hit on a glove, or you can get Enfeeble. There's like, if you really were really feeling it, like a Bane setup or something like that, put it in a Vixens if you're really going crazy. Generally speaking, finding a way to imply Enfeeble might actually be very valuable. Oh, I have one more method of Enfeeble for you that you've probably forgotten about. Uber Elder has a variant of Impresence that drops with Enfeeble on it to make Enfeeble free. I don't know why I mentioned that item like those items exist, but because I Uber bosses. But if you got your hands on one, it would actually be a really good use of it, right? Other options that exist out there, I would recommend keeping your eye on Flesh and Stone again. Flesh and Stone, after its heyday back when Blind used to straight up halve accuracy no matter what, has really taken a nosedive in its usage, from being moved up to 35% reservation, then them taking away the blind function, or nerfing how blind worked, and then moving Flesh and Stone back down to 25%. But at 25%, it is actually really strong as a source of nearby blind if you are an evasion-based build, as well as non-nearby damage mitigation, right? The fact that it is mitigation against far away enemies and against nearby enemies, it is still like a massive reduction in their accuracy. Is pretty nice, specifically a reduction in their accuracy, because reduction in accuracy, much like Enfeeble, scales that really nicely with you stacking evasion. So they work very nicely hand in hand together and it can be something really strong for your character. I would also look into potentially block, another form of avoidance that has honestly just been forgotten about. It's perfectly fine still. Also, look into Arctic Armor and or Tempest Shield, right? Again, Tempest Shield if you're looking at block things. Arctic Armor we've already known to look at for like freeze immunity, but I do want to point out Arctic Armor for the sake of its phase mitigation that it provides while you are stationary. So specifically getting hit while trying to cast, or getting stunned by the first hit of a multi-hit sequence will also give you this DR. Both are very usable cases for this Fizz DR. And these are just some sources that are a little bit less talked about because obviously I can tell you to use fizz conversion, but I want to give you some other options out there. Just because why not? There's a lot of them. One more bonus one before I get ready to wind this all down. Call of the Void actually has a less damage dealt mod on it based on chill effect. It's a really fun ring. You do have to deal with the downside of also you getting chilled really easily, but self chill, baby. Right? So there's a little bit of stuff there. Anyways, that's just a lot of the thoughts that I've had about the defensive stuff coming up. I think the defensive rebalance that we're about to get is actually going to be extremely exciting. I think could be a potentially rough curve. Stay tuned for an update on this opinion after Thursday, right? No idea when I'm going to have an update for this opinion because I'll have to probably run some numbers and who knows what the fuck after the patch notes actually drop in the announcement. You can even tune into the stream for that day, by the way, to find out, in real time what I'm thinking. But I suspect that this opinion will evolve over the course of the next month and a half, really, because it's hard to get all this information right beforehand when it'll be infinitely easier to actually play the game with it and see how it feels. But, thank you guys for listening. And if you want to see more of what I do, again, subscribe to the channel, like the video if you want to see more of it. I have a Discord and a Twitch. Those links are both in the description down below. Discord for chatting, and the Twitch, I actually do stream again now. I've been live a lot of the last week or two, and I'll be live this week and that's all that good stuff. You know the deal. Anyways, drop in the comments defensive mechanisms that you feel like people have forgotten about or you haven't really seen used that much, because I want to start to compile a list of defensives that are worth looking into as we go forward. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.